My name is Jeff Crowder, and I'm on a mission to document and preserve the most interesting and important stories in our Masonic family. My travels have led me all over this country, from the West Coast in Oregon to the East Coast in Florida, and back again. In this episode, I sit down with Brother Dick Heyman, a Freemason for 72 years and a Scottish Rite member for 68 years. Dick Heyman is also a retired Air Force colonel who actually flew missions over war-torn Europe during World War II. Brother Dick Heyman also flew missions over the Korean and Vietnam Wars. He is a true hero among Masons.
Good Masons become good leaders. Good Masons become good followers. Good Masons are active. I remember that I was offered the opportunity to say anything during my initiation, so to speak. And I voiced my opinion in the Almighty God and what it had done for me.
Dick Heyman was raised a Master Mason in Bartlesville Lodge, number 284, in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, in 1947. Bartlesville is about 46 miles north of Tulsa and 47 miles southwest of Coffeyville, Kansas.
I went to this friend of mine, his name was Duffendack, in my hometown in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And he had been involved with our WWII when I was in high school, and so I knew he was a Mason, and I could ask him. I could have asked my father, but my father belonged to a lodge up in Kansas, Keystone Lodge, I think it was called, in Coffeyville, Kansas. So I asked Mr. Duffenbach, who owned the jewelry store, what I should do because I'd like to become a Mason. And so he said, I'm glad you asked me because this is the first step.
Freemasons accept all good men for who they are, regardless of their religious beliefs, as long as they believe in God. Their specific religion is left up to the individual.
We discussed it. I said, Mr. Duffendack, I am Jewish. And he said, yes, and he says, we do not have any Jews in our lodge, but I'm sure that you'll be accepted. Well, I said, well, I don't want to be embarrassed, obviously. And so, anyhow, I applied and was accepted, found out I was the first Jew in that lodge, which was a rather old lodge in Bartlesville. Anyhow, that had my religion had nothing to do with it, obviously. It's just that I wasn't hiding anything from anybody.
Before the Second World War ended, Dick Heyman was sent back to the States, where he eventually ended up at Training Command.
Must have been late September, I guess, of 44. And so, this is long before the war ended. Well, it's 7-8 months before the war ended. So I went on home. I came home, and I had leave. Then I went to, first I went to Training Command, which I did not like. And the request came in for somebody with my age, size. Well, I was a little young on the age part, but anyhow, size and experience to go to another outfit, secret outfit, supposedly. It wasn't, but so anyhow, I went to that, and it happened to be to what they called the 412th Fighter Group.
Beginning in 1943, the 412th Fighter Group Test Wing began flying some of the first jets ever made.
And that was the first group that had jets. We didn't have many. We only had about 8 or 10, I think. They were handmade, of course. And so we were checking out in this P-59 Air Jet Cobra, or what the hell it was called, Air Cobra. No, that wasn't it. But anyhow, it was made by Bell.
In May of 1945, Germany officially surrenders to the Allied forces, unconditionally.
Well, let's see, training command took about 6 months, so I got into that about May of 40. No, it's before that. No, it was about May, because I was in Fresno, California when the Germans finally capitulated, and that was May the 7th or something like that. So I was going to this outfit at that time. Got to this base in California, and that's where we were flying, this P-59. But it was such a rotten airplane and didn't have any range, about 30 minutes of flying time. We also flew P-51s, which is a darn nice airplane to fly. And so we were flying that, and I remember when the Japanese gave up, we were training at that time to go back over to the islands and fight in Japan. And so the war ended, and then we were just sitting around there flying, not knowing what we were going to do. Since we were trained in this jet, they knew we were going to get better ones, so they didn't want to break us up. And finally, in about December, I decided I'd like to do something different. I was ready to go to school because I really didn't have any education, and so I got out of the service. But I went in active reserve, so I was still flying every week.
On June 25th, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, igniting the Korean War.
And then I got recalled to go to Korea.
Yeah, so what were some of the attitudes towards the lead up of Korea?
Well, there's a lot of people that weren't too happy because they'd just gotten established, you might say. Either they'd completed university, or they just got hired by a good company, or they just started their own business. And of course, there were some people that were happy to be back in service. Most of the people had been in the reserves like I had, and maybe not active reserve like I was. And so when they did that, they knew they'd been getting paid for weekend warriors, we called it. And so they accepted it. They had to go. I ended up in this A-26 outfit, and I went, well, let's see, I was recalled 1st November, I think sometime in April. I went to Japan and started flying combat at night in the A-26. Of course, we had a hectic mission, because flying at night, getting shot at night and working in the mountains trying to shoot up trucks and trains and anything else that's rolling. And you got these mountains and your visibility, you're not going to go down there with the flashlight. It affected a lot of us, but we did the job. I don't think we had any psycho. Well, maybe we did, I don't know, but I didn't know of any psychos that just couldn't hack it. But it was mentally, it was tougher on me than World War II had been. God, I've never liked flying at night particularly anyhow, but get down and with me, if I'm going to haul guns and if I'm going to get over there in enemy territory, I'm not going to screw around, just get up here and fly there and fly back. I'm going to do my job, and that's just the way I am, stupid. And I'd get down there in the weeds and I'd go after these trucks, and it wasn't unusual for me to knock out 50 to 100 trucks in one night. Not often, but there was another guy in the outfit that did. He did it regularly. But I'd get my share, and I got a lot of good targets. One night I got a call after I'd been working my area. It didn't just haphazard. You had an area to go work in. So mainly so that you'd learn it, instead of having to learn each one every time. So, and I knew how high these peaks were, and then I could get down in them, and oh God. Anyhow, I don't know if the weather, if something happened anyhow. I still had ammunition left, but I didn't have any more targets or something. So I was coming back to the base. See, at that time we were still based in Japan. but we'd fly. Sometimes we'd refuel in Korea and then go on home, or vice versa. But anyhow, I was coming back and I got this call from the radar control over by Seoul and said, "Anybody got any ammunition left?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." They said, "Well, take such a heading." And they picked me up on radar and directed me over to where they wanted me to go, a couple hundred miles away. And I got over, maybe not that far, but yeah, I got over there. And they said, "Okay, drop down to minimum altitude." So I got down to, it's fairly flat in there, not really, but I got down to about 500 feet or so. And they said, "Slow down." I slowed down. Of course, a bomber or a light bomber like that, you're not going to slow down too damn much. And you add a little bit for wife and kids, and so airspeed. And so I was doing, I don't know, 150, 160 miles an hour, I suppose, which is, the airplane don't stall till it's about 100, but still, you don't have any maneuverability if you get too slow. And I said, "Well, what am I after here?" And they said, "Well, there's an airplane over here. It's dropping hand grenades and firing a burp gun." Well, okay, a plane's a plane. So they directed me around there, and I'm trying this. Finally saw this airplane. Of course, he could turn circles inside. I mean, oh God, light airplane. So I kept messing with it. Get out of ways and come back, and I'd see him in the moonlight, and they'd tell me where he was. And finally, I got a good shot at him. It only took one shot. I mean, well, it was more than one shot, but I hit him, and he was done burning before he ever hit the ground. So I was kind of unusual, bomber pilot getting an enemy airplane and getting in the night too. Bed check Charlie. Well, actually, we called him Piss Call Charlie, but the newspaper called it Bed Check Charlie. Yeah. So
there was an episode of MASH about some guy, at 5 o'clock Charlie or something.
Yeah.
You'd drop one bomb.
Well, that was.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I took a lot of ribbon over, but I said, "Hey, look, a victory's a victory. Show me anybody else that got one. Nobody ever did." But then another target I had was one time I was coming back and hadn't found anything to fire at. And I was over by the water, the waterway between Japan and Korea, the Japanese Sea or whatever it's called. I don't remember now. And I was flying kind of low, and we were kind of looking. This airplane had a person in the right seat. It might be a navigator or bombardier or just another person or whatever. You never knew, because there was nothing he could do over there. He's just there. He could see, though. And there was a gunner in the back. Most of the time you had a couple of turrets back in the back. And they were operated with a periscope, because he couldn't see out otherwise. Anyhow, it's pretty effective. Not every airplane had these rear gunners, but this one did. And I was flying along there looking, and all of a sudden I looked like little campfires all over in this. It wasn't quite an island, but it was like an island, but still had an isthmus across there from the land. I wonder what's out there. And the more I looked, and all these little campfires. I said, God, it must be a bivouac area. So I had some 100-pound bombs that I hadn't dropped. Like I said, hadn't found a thing to shoot at. So I got back out where they couldn't see me or hear me, and then I had a pretty good fix on where I was going, because the water was fluorescent, I could see pretty well. And I came across there going about 300 miles an hour, and I dropped those bombs at intervals. I don't know how many I had, but a whole bunch of them, because we hung two. Since there were 100-pounders, they were only about so big we could hang two on a shackle. And I don't know how many I had in there, but there's a lot. And so I spaced them out on this whole damn place there. And I hit a couple of gasoline trucks, I guess. And I don't know what else, but all of a sudden we pulled off from there, and the gunner was strafing it as I pulled away, of course, with his bottom turret. We had that whole damn thing burning. I don't know how many, but they flew a photo recce airplane that had infrared camera system over it, and I never found out for sure what all was destroyed, but it was evidently a lot of vehicles and a hell of a lot of troops.
On July 27, 1953, North Korea, China, and the United States signed an armistice agreement. After the armistice was signed, Dick Heyman headed back to the United States.
I had various assignments. I went training command and I went training command, and then they closed the base down in Texas. Right on the Gulf Coast. Had 2 classes, and I was flight commander, and they closed the base. So I went to Lackland, and I taught to these ROTC graduates, new second lieutenants. I taught them hydraulics and aircraft systems, theory of flight, and ground school. I had to teach that. And here I was, never been to college, and all these guys are all college graduates, and I'm trying to teach them hydraulics and some other scientific course. I did it. God, I tell you, I had to burn a lot of midnight oil. But that's the Air Force for you. Anyhow, then an assignment came in for in England, fly B-66, fly B-4. I don't know, fly a light bomber like the A-26. And so, boy, I hopped on that. I had 2 children at the time, no wife, 2 little kids. And one was staying with my mother and one with my sister. And so I got this assignment in England, so I got the 2 kids, took them to England with me. Hired a nursemaid to take care of them while I was over there. But anyhow, when I got there, I had to go through an assignment center. And they said, they looked at my record, says, you've got some jet time and a lot of fighter time. I said, yep. They said, we'll send you down to 20th Fighter Wing. And boy, I kept my mouth shut. I was supposed to go with this bomber outfit. Didn't say a word, boy. I said, okay, give them orders. They did, and I was on that train within an hour. Get out there. So I ended up flying fighters, and that's where I met my wife to be. And I worked there in that fighter outfit, and then I went to headquarters in London for about a year, which was a good experience. And then I came back home to a bad experience. I was assigned to SAC.
SAC stands for Strategic Air Command.
SAC took good care of me, but I did not like going to a bomber outfit. And I ended up in B-47s for 6 years. And I got a lot of time, but I broke all the rules because I was made an instructor very shortly after I got there, which normally it took about a year or 2 before anybody did that. But luckily they recognized my capability, I guess, or my bullshit, because I confused them. Anyhow, I ended up that's when I made my spot lieutenant colonel, and then later I got the permanent lieutenant colonelcy, which I told you about and I was very proud of. And anyhow, I was in SAC for about 6 years. Barbara and I got married there, and we had our 2 children there at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Pease Air Force Base. And went from there then to training at Wichita in the F-105. General I'd worked for pulled strings to get me out of bombers to get me into the 105. And he knew what I wanted. He knew what I was capable of. So.
In November 1961, a detachment of 151 airmen and 16 propelled-driven airplanes were sent to an old French airfield just north of Saigon.
Took my training, went right to Vietnam, Philippines and then Vietnam. And you're supposed to go through snake school when you got to, that's survival school for living in the jungle, if you had to bail out. But Dane Milliman and I slipped through without going to snake school because it wasn't on our order specific. And we went right to our fighter outfit over in Thailand, flying 105s. And first I was put And this squadron that I didn't get along with, within 6 hours I was out of that squadron in another one. This first one, he didn't like bomber pilots, and I said it wasn't my choice, you know. Anyhow, I went to this other squadron, which was really good for me, everybody else concerned. And so within a couple of weeks, I was made the ops officer, which is the number 2 man, in other words, for fighter outfit. And within 3 months, I was squadron commander. Came back to Edwards Air Force Base, the test center, and I was there about a year and a half. And they were going to send me then to Washington, D.C., work in the Puzzle Palace. And I said, well, I don't want that. I said, that'd be the end of my career. No, as lieutenant colonel, which isn't all bad. So I volunteered and said, send me to Korea, or send me to Vietnam, or wherever you want. I want to get back on flight line. And so they did. And I went back, flew another tour, and was a commander again as soon as I got there. This one mission I was on, I was carrying what's called a bullpup, which is about a 1-ton weapon. It's a missile. And you control it, you fire it, and then you got a little hand control here that you're supposed to be able to control it, you know. But it's notorious for not taking instructions. So I was working, had a FAC, you know, a forward air controller in a light airplane. He's flying in the areas. This is over Laos. We didn't have any enemy aircraft in the, so that was good. There's a lot of people still shooting at you. But so here's this, like Michael said, this a sort of a colonial house, style house on the side of this hill. And next to it is a couple other little outbuildings. And we were told that this house, they had an army headquarters or something, the Viet Cong were using it as some sort of a headquarters. And this FAC was directing me, you know, here's what I want you to do, fire that thing. And, okay, so I got back there and I fired this weapon, bullpup, and it goes out, and I'm giving it controls, you know, and I said, oh, try to point it where I want it, and it wouldn't go. It would not take my instructions. And I'm trying everything. I hit the release button again to activate the radios, whatever, you know. Of course, I'm flying along and watching it. I'm back here because it's doing about 2,000 miles an hour, and I'm doing about 600. And anyhow, it did not take my instructions at all, and veered. It did not hit this colonial house. It hit one of these little outbuildings. Well, when it hit, nothing happened. The house fell down, but no explosion. No, what in the world? And so I flew over it, and the FAC flew over it, and both of us looked. Now, of course, he's down lower than I was, and couldn't figure out. So I was up towards the top of this mountain that went from where that house was up. So it wasn't a huge one, but it was a mountain. And all of a sudden, the top of that mountain come off. I mean, and evidently, that bullpup had gone through that house, our building, and there was a tunnel that was hiding the tunnel there, tunnel entrance. And it went down in that tunnel until it probably went around a bit, but when it finally hit a solid wall of some kind, it exploded. Well, that thing must have been full of ammunition and munitions, rather, of all sorts. And it blew for hours. Anyhow. I'm not at all ashamed of what I did over there, my job. I mean, it's just like being a fireman. You don't pick your fire that you're going to fight. My only regret was it sounds bloodthirsty, but I really wanted to shoot down an airplane in Vietnam, and I never got an opportunity. I did a good job. I will say that with all modesty. But I flew 100 counters, of which 50 of them were in the Hanoi area. And if I'm going to be the commander, I'm going to lead, and I did. And we had the best record as far as hitting the target, getting off on time, least number of losses. Yeah, we lost 3 or 4 airplanes, we only lost 2 pilots. The other airplane outfits were losing 2 a week, some of them.
Yeah.
So, no. Of course, I can't take credit for all that. It's like I can't take credit when we don't have aircraft accidents. Don't fly, you're not going to have an accident. But anyhow, I flew my tour, came back home, was assigned to Germany, went there, took the family with me. We had 4 kids. And I guess 2 of them we left in the States because they were going to start in college, the older ones. So we were stationed in Germany for 3.5 years, had good jobs. I had supposed to be a very, very secret outfit. The whole world knew what it was, so no use in discussing it. But anyhow, then I got to be a director ops in a wing, fighter wings of F-4s, and that's where I flew the F-4. We had a club at Hahn where we'd built prior to I arriving, the Masons had kind of organized this club, and they built a clubhouse on property that was leased from the Germans by the Air Force. And so they allowed us to build or not us because I wasn't there at the time, but it allowed this clubhouse to be built. So we had a very informal club of Masons. And there was a lot of camaraderie. Officers and enlisted men and a few civilians were in this club. I really can't say how many people belonged to it, but my memory says around 30 or 40. I'm not sure. And we had little functions, like maybe a little a get together and have hamburgers and coffee or Coke or beer or whatever. And but it was just a club where we could talk about Masonic activities and rehearse, review old happenings, and of course we could not conduct any lodge business because we were not an established lodge. It was strictly a club. Unfortunate thing had happened about sometime in the 50s there was when the services suddenly came up with this equal opportunity program, which was justified and needed, and to eliminate all prejudice against color or religion or any of the other things that I'm sure you're familiar with that took place. The wing commander came to me because I was a ranking officer that happened to belong to the club and told me that we had to integrate, and at that time, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but at the time, his quote to me was, "You have to take and you have to have the Negroes belong to your club." And of course, the title is black, which is proper, but at that time, that's what was said. And I informed him. I said, "Sir, if the Negroes or if the blacks, I'll use that now, wish to join, have them come and ask to join us. We're just a club." And he said, "No, that's not good enough." And I said, "There's an organization called Prince Hall, and I'm not familiar with it, but I know that the blacks belong to that. And as far as I'm concerned, fine. If they want to join, tell them to come and ask us. But I'm not going out and solicit it. That's their club. They have theirs, we have ours. If they want to join, I don't mind. None of us do, because we work with them daily in our activities as military men." Well, that wasn't good enough. And I said, "I am not going to solicit people to do something they don't want to do." Well, he couldn't order me to. He tried to, but this was a private organization, and he couldn't do that. But anyhow, we had a lot of hassle over that. So he threatened to close the club down completely. And there was a lot of discussion. About that time, though, I was transferred, so I don't know what the end results were. But it was an unfortunate thing. It wasn't something that we manufactured or brought up. As I recall, there was nothing that said that we could or could not have, because the club was informal. It wasn't licensed. It wasn't charter. It wasn't anything as far as the Grand Lodge was concerned. And it was just an organization of local Masons that wanted to get together. And I call it unfortunate because it could have been resolved a lot easier. Say, hey, if you guys want to join with us, let us know. This wing commander, he was anxious to make a real good showing, because the integration was a big thing at that time, rightfully so. And I recall very vividly that they had a, what did they call it? Black Appreciation Day, I believe that's what it was. And so all ranks were invited to come to this meeting at some, I don't know if it's a theater or club or what it was, anyhow, somewhere on base, and discuss whatever. And so they had different people selected to be speakers, and they talked quite a bit about how they were unjustly, some of them said unjustly treated, and others said, no, that's not true. I had every opportunity, I took advantage of it. So it's back and forth discussions. This has nothing to do with Masonic, except this, what I've already told you, how our experience with our club was. Anyhow, finally, this wing commander said, well, Dick, there's nobody gotten up and said any of our opinion. You do it. Wait a minute, But anyhow, he, if they make a suggestion, he's your boss. He's, yes, sir. So I got up and I said, you're all complaining that you go into Cologne, or one of the cities here in Germany, and little kids point to you and say, there's a black man. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's nothing to be ashamed of. You ought to be proud of it. If that's what you are, you are. I said, you're complaining about somebody on the sidewalk saying something to you. I said, 10 years ago, if I was walking down that same street in Cologne, I wouldn't be allowed to walk on the sidewalk. I'd have to walk in the gutter. I'm Jewish, and that's the way the Jews were treated in Cologne 10 years ago. And I said, so put yourself in my shoes for a minute instead of me into your shoes. Let's talk this out. Anyhow, that was the sum total of my contribution to the. And then after 3.5 years, I came back to the States and I was assigned to Air Defense Command, and eventually ended up at Colorado Springs, Director of Safety for the Air Defense Command. And I did about 1.5 years there, and then I retired. I said, hell, 32 years I've had a bull. You ask what I want to be remembered as, just that I did my job. That's all I asked for. I'm proud of serving my country, and people ask me to tell about it, just like I've been doing with you. And I can look at it. I lost some dear friends, but I had some good times, and I remember those good times. A loving husband. I think I was a good father. But as far as the fighter outfits I was in, any outfit I was in, I think we had as good, if not a better record than any other squadron. And it wasn't just me that did that. It's the guys, all the guys, the armors, the mechanics, the supply, the pilots, the admin, everybody. And we worked as units. And I was pretty proud of that. I got the standard, distinguished flying crosses and air medals, such as that.